Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Luke Reacts. This week, I have with me none other than Heather Johnston. And if you're wondering who Heather Johnston is, let me read to you her bio. Heather Johnston is the founder and president of U.S Israel and the U.S Israel Education Association. Heather Johnston's 25-year involvement with the nation of Israel has afforded her a unique position to work dynamically inside the U.S. Israel relationship as an educator and thought leader. Heather is an author and world renowned speaker on the Jewish Christian relationship and the modern Israel in biblical prophecy. For the past decade, she has led dozens of tours to Israel comprised of businessmen, members of Congress, and other distinguished guests and leaders. You and I were in Israel together this year, a couple of times, actually. I saw you there, and it's great to have you here on this show. And the purpose I think we need to kind of get into is the recent issues related to the attacks on, let's say, Christian Zionists. And I think you and I both probably would consider ourselves Christian Zionists. And recently, Tucker Carlson, on his show last week, actually, said that the group that he hates the most are Christian Zionists. And he had said it the week before with Margie Taylor Greene. He said basically the exact same thing. I just loathe those Christian Zionists, the people, of all the people that are out there. And I think, Heather, I'd love you to kind of get your thoughts on this. Part of my thinking is that the reason that he is so antagonistic towards Christian Zionists is because we're the people that are in his way. If you are trying to undermine the relationship between Israel and the United States, we represent millions and millions and millions, and he doesn't like that. So how are you thinking in terms of this this last week and the statements by Tucker Carlson?
Mm-hmm. Well, I first would say that it probably hurt a lot of people's feelings because I think there's a lot of Christian supporters of Israel that listen to Tucker Carlson. And right. I've gotten a big response on that. How could he say that? We love him. How could he tell us that he hates us? I think that was my first reaction to that. And then I think secondly, it made me understand a little bit that there's got to be some sort of a root of misunderstanding of his viewpoint on the U.S. Israel relationship, the collaboration that we have. I mean, after all, Israel is, besides being like our aircraft carrier in the Middle East and defending all of our democratic values, I don't think we have a greater ally in the world with which we work with so regularly, that is so strategic to the United States than the state of Israel. But I also seem to think that in his calling the Christian Zionists heretics, or that it's a heresy, helped us understand that he's suddenly in a theological conundrum. Mm-hmm. And that bothered me because I think, and that's what I brought out on social media, Luke, is just that understanding that if he sees it that way, then he is akin to a replacement theology. There's no doubt about that. The Catholic Church repudiated that, by the way. Tucker's Catholic. So many of my friends are Catholic, but they understand that the Catholic Church repudiated that back in the later 20th century in the founding of the modern state of Israel. Pope John Paul II in 1980 visited a synagogue in Germany, and he said that the Jews remain the people of God, and they've never been abrogated by God. And I think that is the truest statement ever.
So last week, on Tuesday, was the 60th anniversary of Nostra Aetate, which is the Catholic encyclical, the major kind of one of those big Catholic documents that got rid of the charge of deicide. And it was the same day that Tucker released his video decrying Christian
Mm,
Zionists.
mm,
And
mm,
and I think it's no surprise there, actually.
mm,
There is I think Tucker has for a long time been putting forth this theopolitical language, right?
mm,
So
mm,
I firmly think that has embraced replacement theology.
mhm,
He is one of those that's, would be of the mind that says
mm,
there's no that ancient and modern Israel have nothing to do with each other.
mm,
Like it's, the church. I haven't heard him explicitly say that the church replaces the Jews,
mhm,
but all of his friends do. All the a lot of the people that are pushing his messaging out there are saying that.
mhm,
And I think you and I recognize that, that framing is not found in the Bible
mhm.
at all,
Yeah, no,
right? I mean,
I think it's really, really true, and let's define it for your audience, because people, replacement theology, and sometimes it's called supersessionism, but it's the
mhm,
belief that the Christian church has completely replaced Israel in God's covenant and redemptive purposes, and it claims that because of Israel's unbelief, that God has transferred all covenant promises, such as the Abrahamic blessings, the identity as God's chosen people, to the church alone, leaving no
mhm,
continuing role for the ethnic people of Israel. And so it really falsely teaches that the church has overtaken Israel's role in God's plan. And of course, it cancels God's promises to Israel, God's
mhm,
promises to the Jewish people. Well, we know that not to be true, that there is an eternal covenant that God made with Abraham involving a particular people living in a particular land that would bring blessings to the world. That was an
right,
irrevocable covenant, had nothing to do with whether there were sinful, responses from the Jewish people. Now, the Sinai covenant was different. That's the old covenant, and people
right.
get that confused with Abraham's
They do
covenant. But that
oftentimes.
continuum of Abraham's covenant, of the Jewish people living in a particular land, carrying forward the national blessings. I mean, Luke, the problem with this, that singularly, is that we watched for thousands of years the Jewish people carry forward the glory of God, the prophets, the temple,
Mhm,
leading all the way up until we have a Jewish Messiah coming into
mhm,
the world, the rabbi, the 12 apostles who laid their life down to get the gospel to the nations, and Paul coming forward very, very clearly and saying, God has not rejected his people, and
right.
neither should you in any way curse them. They're supposed to be honored for their role in history. And we have come into their tree. We've been grafted in to the story of Israel. Who does God make his new covenant with? He makes it with the house of Israel,
Yeah.
Jeremiah 31. So the Jews have a continuum. I see that sort of insidious systemically in a lot of the statements that are being made out there today. That adherence to that replacement theology, the Jews are out, the Christians are in, as God's chosen people. And the failure to understand that Israel actually did not sin the eternal covenant away,
Right.
remains a people, remains a land, and they continue to have, they've brought the national, international blessings, spiritual blessings to the world.
Well, I think that there's a lot of confusion, Heather, when people are talking about the promise to Abraham versus the promise to Abraham. I just did this kind of the study on that, and I would encourage everybody to just read the book of Genesis and how
Mhm,
many times God says to Abraham, first Abram, and then changes his name to Abraham, to your offspring I will give this land.
mhm,
Repeatedly, to your offspring. So the land is the initial,
mhm,
the land and the people going together is the initial kind of
mhm,
node there. And then later, as the promise, as God is repeating this promise, he then says, and through you all the nations will be blessed. Right? Like, so the initial promise is where God is saying, to your offspring I'll give this land. Look at the stars in the heavens, or the sand in the seashores. Right? Like, to your offspring I will give this land. And then later he says, and I will make you a blessing to the nations. Right? Like, that picking up on the blessing part is actually what is expanded to include us who are Gentile. But the land and the people, the land being the land of Israel and the people being the Jews, is an everlasting promise. And I don't know about you, but I tend to think that everlasting probably means everlasting when God's saying it. I was just like,
it's so important, Luke, to understand that what you just said is the critical thing. It's eternal. It's the eternal nature of that covenant makes it completely irrevocable. It also puts it so that it is transforming space and time. It's being driven along by God himself, and he has set it up in the world in order for the nations to be blessed. And so, Israel was not perfect. They sinned and they broke the old covenant, that Sinai covenant. They did break. They went into exile for it, but they could never break the Abrahamic covenant. It was God's ratification. He's the one that settled that matter and swore by oath to Abraham. He never did that to anybody else in the whole Bible. Swore on oath that this covenant was eternal and it would go to his descendants.
But even that the Mosaic law, the old covenant, that was the people sinned to the point where they're taken off into exile in Babylon, 586. But then 70 years later, they're restored because that was the promise of God made to Jeremiah, that I will restore you back to this land. And so the people go back with Ezra and Nehemiah, and people should read those books too, right? Like, and so you have this, the punishment of 70 years and then the restoration. And then, it ultimately, Israel is in 70 AD and then following 132 exiled again, right? But there seems to be, I'm of the mind, I'm being a Christian Zionist, I'm of the mind that what we're seeing now, this restoration is happening again. And that second one, the second restoration, the first one, promised by Jeremiah that it will be a 70-year exile. In Luke 21, Jesus says that Jerusalem shall be trampled on by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled. Now, I'm of the mind that once, like, there's a point in which the Gentiles, what happens then, right? When the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled, what's next? And I'm of the mind that what's next is what we see. What we see now is the what next. We are seeing the restoration of Israel. And the expectation of the restoration of Israel goes way back. It's not Catholic. It's like Jonathan Edwards saw the restoration, the physical restoration of Israel as part of God's redemptive plan. Like, people put a lot of stock in, this is just what those dispensationalist things, or those people who read the Schofield Bible. I grew up in the denomination that was like the John Nelson Darby's denomination. It was, I grew up Plymouth Brethren. Okay. And I was at home recently and I said to my dad, I was like, Dad, did any chance we have a Schofield Bible? Because I'm told it's my nightstand reading. And I don't remember having a Schofield Bible. And one would think that the denomination, that, the guy grew up in the house of the founder of dispensationalism would be weaned on Schofield. But my dad was like, no, I don't think so. And I went down, looked at all the collection of Bibles from way back when, from the point in which my dad was saved until now, and there was no Schofield Bible. So I'm of the mind that, like, there's a lot of projection about what it is that, we who are Christian Zionists believe. But I think it's, to your point, we believe that the covenant that God made with Abraham continues, and the people living in the land that was promised to them as their everlasting covenant is part of God's plan. It's, and it kind of gets more complicated from that, but I think at the baseline, that's what Christian Zionism is ultimately. It's a hope for us who are Gentiles. Like God's been faithful to this people for thousands of years, He'll be faithful to us too. Isn't that right?
Yeah. And I think too, a great question for people just to ask the question is, can Israel sin that eternal covenant away? And as to your original point, Luke, to read Genesis 12 to 22, everybody needs to go zone in on that while we're in this big debate in the United States. Just go read it and ask yourself, can Israel sin this covenant away? And even despite the exiles, I mean, the truth of the matter is Israel has been out of the land more than they've been in it. So there's reasons for people to be in a quandary and a conundrum about this. I mean, the last exile was 2,000 years. That's a long time for people to think to themselves, the Jews have been pushed out in their unbelief. Right. They've been moved out. But to God, 1,000 years is like a single day. That's what he said. Right. So in the covenant scheme of things, this is a covenantal brief interlude. You know what I mean? Right. And them coming back into the land is a sign, as it was to Pope John Paul II. Mm-hmm. It was a sign to him of God's restoration and that God continues his blessing to the Jews. His promises are continuing. His prophecies over that nation are unfolding, and those are to be anticipated.
Yeah, and I think that part of God's providence was also to keep the Jews even like as Jews even while they're in exile. I mean, because you can imagine, if there was no Jews on earth who kept kosher and followed Torah and did the weekly Torah portion and did Shabbat and did these things of like what we call Judaism.
Right.
If nobody on earth was doing it, I feel like we would view it the way that we view like Greek mythology. Yeah, I mean, there was a point in history where everybody was like really concerned about Zeus and Apollo and like, whatever I can't remember the guy, Poseidon. Yeah, everybody, and now we think of those things, they're movies, and we think of them in terms of like they're myths, and we don't know anybody who thinks in those terms, right? Like, and yet God, in His providence, kept the people together. As in spite of a bunch of Christians over the centuries trying to kill them and make them eat bacon, like we did bad things to them. But God preserved them. And to think that all of that we're saying with Israel and whatever is a matter of time and chance and international intrigue. Let me shift gears a little bit. There was there is a revival taking place in America among Gen Z in particular, right? You have with particularly after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, pastors are reporting a 20% increase in the number of people coming to church. Bible sales are up like 10 million units year on year. Spotify said they're 50% increase in Christian music listening. There's revivals, events, campaigns happening on major state schools every week all across America, thousands of kids coming to faith. So you have this movement of like a revival taking place. And at the same time, you have this injection of divisive figures who are trying to wreck that. And it seems Israel seems to be the primary rub. So the cause of all this, the reason why Tucker was, talked about his hatred of Christian Zionism was he interviewed a guy named Nick Fuentes. And Nick Fuentes is a young guy. Don't actually even know how old he is, but he's in his 30s, I think. But I started tracking Nick Fuentes back in 2022 because there was this movement called the Goyim Defense League, which is this these Gentiles, let's call them, who would put flyers in the driveways of Jews as a form of intimidation, and these flyers would say stuff like, here's the 10 Jews who run Disney, and Disney's a pedophile organization, or here's the 7 Jews who want to take away your guns, and that kind of thing. And Nick was on that team. He was a big part of driving that narrative. And I was talking to somebody this week, a young guy who says Nick Fuentes's email, like, videos are always in his threads on Instagram or TikTok or X or whatever platform they're on. Which, so there's this guy. I mean, he's very influential. He's a very much a bad guy. By everybody is aware that he's a bad guy. But Tucker had him on and platformed him, and didn't ask him any hard questions, really. And he came out in support, like, I love Hitler and I love Stalin, and blaming the Jews. And, like, one would think in that moment Tucker might call him out, but he didn't. Okay, fast forward to Thursday. Reports were coming out that the Heritage Foundation had canceled Tucker. Tucker had used to be a big speaker for Heritage, and they had kind of distanced themselves from Tucker. Actually, which is true. There was pictures of Tucker on like in the walls and the hallways of the Heritage Foundation headquarters. There was pictures of Tucker, and so they took him down, actually. And they had gotten rid of a lot of the materials because Tucker had become so contrarian and had been so antagonistic towards a lot of the people in the conservative movement. It just became kind of too much. Anyways, word got out that Heritage had done this, and Tucker Carlson's like the number 3 most watched podcast in the United States, which is terrifying. But what it set up was it forced the president of the Heritage Foundation to come out with a video in which he says, basically, I'm a Christian. I support America. It's like, it's very important to me, but we can't cancel people. It really does us no good to cancel people. And he says there's a lot of stuff we got to fight on the left, and if we're going at each other, it is not a path forward for us. Okay, which blew up. I mean, I got that Thursday afternoon on my feed, and there was I don't know if your feed looks like mine, but there was no other conversation taking place.
It was amazing.
And it was either you were standing with Kevin Roberts or you were against Kevin Roberts. Now, I want to talk about Kevin here in Heritage for a minute. And I want to start out by saying that Kevin was one of the first signers. We have a document. He's Catholic, as you mentioned. We started this thing called the Coalitions of Catholics Against Antisemitism, which, as you might imagine, is a coalition of Catholics against antisemitism. And Kevin was an early signer to that. Right after October 7th, me and 3 others, we started the National Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism. One of the partners of that was the Heritage Foundation. And they actually ended up, it gave birth to a thing they called Project Esther, which was a way of kind of taking down some of the bad actors, particularly on the left, that were doing the encampments and the pro-Hamas stuff. I had an October 7th rally on the Mall in Washington, D.C. He was one of my main speakers at that event. Spoke at an event we had for Catholics on anti-Semitism at Franciscan University. So, I mean, I can go on and on about, Kevin Roberts' bona fides when it comes to standing against anti-Semitism. But we have this problem where he comes out and defends Tucker, he doesn't defend Nick Fuentes. He
Right.
actually says he's like Nick Fuentes is a very nasty guy. I can't find the language here explicitly, but it was very clear that there's nothing that they want to do with Nick Fuentes. But Tucker's a different story. And so the rub becomes what platforming Tucker and not distancing themselves from Tucker, or they had and now they're walking it back. And the rub again becomes Israel. Like it's not the pro-life issue, it's not the gay marriage issue or LGBT stuff or euthanasia or immigration, like all the hot issues that we're talking about on a day-to-day in the United States. The issue that is the seeming divisive issue is Israel. And it's the issue that's dividing MAGA right now too on this point. And so how do you see like Kevin's what's the, I don't know, the path forward here in relation between Kevin, Tucker, this issue with the MAGA movement, but like we really have a real problem right here within the movement if we're not able to articulate what we think about where Tucker's at versus Nick Fuentes versus the movement versus Israel, all that stuff.
Well, I think Luke, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you're hitting right at the point, which is we are missing some real leadership in the MAGA movement on the understanding of our deepest values, our historic identity, and the way that we view the world, the way we view hate. My question is, why would any conservative leader need to rush to the defense of Tucker Carlson, who is so well established in his platform? Why not draw back and say, am I able to really support these things that he is saying? Because hate in any of its forms is wrong. Now, it's not that you can't verbalize your hate online, but when it comes to Jews and Israel and it comes to Muslims in the world, we're right at the fever pitch, of the largest war in the Middle East that we've had in decades and decades. We've never seen anything like this since the founding of the modern state of Israel, at a fever pitch of anti-Semitism against the Jewish people. And so it just seems so out of time and out of turn to have a conservative leader step up and try to defend something rather than pull back and say, we actually don't support those words. You can say we like Tucker, but we don't like that. We don't stand with that, because somebody needs to be leading on that front in the MAGA movement and being real clear about our geopolitical and our biblical worldview of the U.S. Israel relationship. It goes back again to, do we have a better ally, a democratic ally in the world today that we more strategically collaborate with than the state of Israel? Or does it mean they're right all the time and that we agree with their leaders all the time? No, we're actually in disagreement with them every other week on something. But it doesn't mean that you remove your support from the greatest democratic forefront inside the Middle East, the worst neighborhood in the world. So these things don't make a lot of sense. And then you add the theological element to it, and you act like Israel is any other nation in the world. They're not any other nation, for the reasons that we just talked about. That God has an enduring covenant and promise with that particular group living in that particular land. And those promises were to be met with participation, not even just noticing it, not even just going, okay, well, they're particular and God has a special continuum with those people. It's not just that. He's actually called for Gentile participation. In those days and at that time, when I restore Israel, I will beckon to the Gentiles. I'll lift a banner to the nations and they will carry you, Israel. They're going to put your daughters on their shoulders, your sons into their arms. The kings are going to come to you. They're going to be foster fathers to you. They're going to help rebuild your walls. They're going to serve you. For the nation that won't serve you will perish and be utterly destroyed. Isaiah 60, verses 10 and 11.
Wow.
So we have a real strong need for leadership around a biblical worldview, geopolitical worldview, on this U.S. Israel collaboration. It seems that one of our big tent poles is faltering.
Yes. Well, I agree. And let me read to you the part of the statement that Kevin Roberts shared on Thursday that caused this trouble. It says, this is the robust debate we invite our colleagues, movement friends, our members, and the American public. We will always defend the truth. We will always defend America. We will always defend our friends against slander of bad actors who serve someone else's agenda. That includes Tucker Carlson, who remains and as I have always said, will always be a close friend of the Heritage Foundation. And then he goes on, he says, the venomous coalition attacking him are sowing division. Their attempt to cancel him will fail. Most importantly, the American people expect us to focus on our political adversaries on the left, not attacking our friends on the right. I disagree and even abhor things what Nick Fuentes says, but canceling him is not the answer either. And he goes on. So it seems to me like they're all, I mean, he's also saying that there's this source of division here, but it's, I think we're seeing the source of division in different ways. I think I'm of the mind that the source of division is those who are actually, who are attacking Israel and Israel's friends here in the United States. It's the people who are attacking Israel. I mean, like it took within hours of Charlie Kirk's assassination before the Jews were blamed and Assad was blamed, or I mean Mossad, etc. And I mean, it seems to be that like of all the issues that are, you know, could have been used to divide the MAGA movement, Israel's is the one. Now, part of it makes me think, Heather, like, what is God doing something here? Because there's like 70 times in the Hebrew Bible where God says, I'm going to do X so that the nations of the world will know that I am their God. Right. I was asked to speak to some IDF soldiers who were visiting the United States a couple of weeks ago. And I was sitting down with them and I said to them, like, you know, Christians that support Israel, and I was making the case for, you know, what we're doing, what we're about. And I said to them, you know, isn't it amazing that in the first two attacks against Israel from Iran, ballistic missiles, hundreds of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, drones, like you name it, was thrown at Israel. And how many Jews were killed in those first two attacks? Zero. In the second attack, actually more Iranians were killed than anybody else, because one of those rockets exploded on the launch pad in Iran and killed like a dozen guys in Iran. And to think that this is like, oh, nothing, or like a thing of time and chance, or even like Israel's skill at technology, or the you know, the American and Jordanian and Saudis all shooting down these yeah, sure, okay, but listen, I don't know, it's a lot of faith in tech then, and I think God's like, no, hey, like God wants this to be a part of the conversation.
He does. He just wants it. He just wants it to be in a proper alignment with him. We need a biblical worldview as part of the MAGA movement. We have so many Christian supporters that are putting their faith inside of a political party that holds their values. And what Tucker is saying and what Nick Fuentes is saying is a complete departure from the biblical worldview concerning the U.S. Israel relationship. Not to mention, they're our greatest ally in the Middle East, just practically speaking.
So I get one of the kind of common threads, or that people are kind of pulling on starting on Friday, but kind of carried through the weekend, is this what the framing it's being used is called no enemies to the right. right?
Mhm.
NETTR. It already has an acronym, right?
Mhm.
So and you hear that in Kevin Roberts's framing here, like we have no enemy to the right, which is kind of an absurd position, and it's not particularly biblical, because we have to to your point on having a biblical worldview, it means that we actually do see a difference there. Like, there is a line somewhere to be found.
Mhm.
And I think part of the question that I'm hoping that a lot of conservative leaders this week will wrestle with is not if there's a line, because it's clear that, I remember in back when the Black Lives Matter debate and all that sort of stuff, and there was a lot of conversation about discrimination, that we can't discriminate against anybody. And I was like, well, that's not true. We discriminate actually all the time. It's the question is, where's the line? Because I don't think any of us want, I think we would all be fine discriminating against a pedophile working in an elementary school, right? Like, we have we found a line. I think the line's actually further on that. But my point is, it's not like we can't have any line. The question is, where do we put the line? And I think, we who want to see like a I'm happy with a big tent MAGA movement. But I also think it's really important that we're clear on that people like Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson don't cut it. And Candace Owen, for that matter, too.
Yes. Well, I'm in agreement with you. I think that we're at a dangerous precipice. And I think that we all want the biggest possible tent that we can have for conservative values. But there is a line that was crossed last week.
Yeah.
And this anti-Semitism and this giving platform to the twisting and the turning of history, and that Hitler's okay, and that, this whole notion for another generation that's sitting there listening to a Tucker Carlson talk about that. Is that really where we want the direction to go? Do we really believe that? And I think that maybe it's just corrections that need to be made. It'd be better if conservative leaders would step out and say, actually, no, we don't want to deplatform you, and no, we don't want to cancel you, but this was not okay. Why couldn't it just be like that, versus rushing to the defense of? I don't think we have to rush to the defense of on everything. We can point out this is wrong, and here's why it is wrong. And go on media and say it. I did it. I made my first video, Luke, on X last week, and it went viral. And it was just talking about this, just saying, I'm so sorry, but Christian Zionism is not a heresy. It is not a pariah on the Christian faith. It's not an extrapolation made by theologians a few hundred years ago. It's more than that.
I saw you getting viral.
It's an eternal covenant. It's an eternal covenant that harkens way past Darby and Schofield and all of that. It is an eternal covenant in play. Best person to look at is Paul. The Apostle Paul was as clear as day. Don't turn on the Jews. Honor them. They have given you the covenants. They've given you the glory, the prophets. They have thousands of years of preparation. They made and they cleared a road across the desert for God, for the nations. They've brought you your blessings. Spiritual blessings sponsored by Israel. Small wonder that Jesus in John 4:22 to the Samaritan woman said, salvation is from the Jews.
Yeah. And let's pivot a little bit here. I mean, I've known you to be a very astute kind of political observer. And one of the things that I'm kind of surprised at is it seems that the calculation here by some political people who seem to be, in my mind, or had been astute political observers, they're trying to trading the Jewish vote for what I would call the incel vote, which is incels for involuntary celibate, right? Like it's these young men who like can't do anything. Okay, and that seems to be a bad equation because in the last election, the Jewish vote was about 40%, and if there's about 8 million Jews in the United States,
Yeah.
you're at 350. 3.4, 3.5 million if they all voted, and I don't know if all of them voted, but let's say that it was enough. It was enough of a margin to where Trump won all of the swing states, and particularly Pennsylvania. I think he would have won because of the Jewish vote. He wouldn't have won it without the Jewish vote. But there seems to be that political trade-off, and I'm of the mind that somebody's in the room calculating the numbers and thinking, oh, we can lose the Jewish vote and pick up this Gen Z disenfranchised men vote. And that's a poor calculation, because what we know is that what starts with the Jews doesn't end with the Jews. So you start platforming people who, they're going against Jews and they're celebrating Hitler. You think that they're going to, like, the Latinos are not gonna bounce, or the young black men are not gonna bounce? I mean, this is a very dangerous calculation.
Like, or even how about Muslims in our country? Right. I mean, it's anybody that's hated.
Right. It seems to me a bad calculation on from a political standpoint to try and play this game like this.
Yeah, it does. I think you're, to your original point, Luke, we are in great need of some leadership in this conservative movement that is able to correct in a very clear way this wrong theology, this replacement theology that leads to anti-Semitism, and just the pushing out of Israel and the Jews as if they're not important is the poisonous root in the land. It has always been, it always will be. It is in defiance of God. So it clearly represents some sort of a demonic spirit that really has been able to course its way through history and annihilate the Jewish people. I mean, it was,
and we're seeing it with the, like in like with the UK. The UK has they I think today is the anniversary of the Balfour Declaration, and here we are, I don't know how many years later, actually, more than 100. And the UK has said, we're going to recognize a Palestinian state. They have, they are being inundated with jihadi Muslims who are causing a great deal of trouble. And they seemingly unable to figure out a path out of their predicament. And I always thought that, is it a causation or a correlation? Because you see this with Christian denominations that have embraced boycott, divestment, and sanction of Israel. They're all plummeting in membership. The Presbyterian USA, United Methodist Church, the Episcopal Church. I mean, they're half what they were 25 years ago. And it's after they have adopted the anti-Israel positions that their decline really begins to increase. And so it's, you can see this, in the UK, you can see it in churches, you can see it. And the fact that there are good political strategists who seemingly are unaware of the problem that we are facing if we go down that road is shocking to me. And it's incumbent upon us, you and me, Heather, we got to call out our friends and be like, guys, people with bigger followers than us need to step up and start articulating leadership. What does it mean to have a big tent, and a righteous big tent for the movement?
Well, I'm in complete agreement with you on all of that. And it does seem that we need to go back to some theological roots that have grown sideways. Sometimes when you plant a tree, it can grow sideways. It doesn't grow straight up and down if you don't plant it right.
Right.
And so when you look at replacement theology, which has its roots back to the 2nd century, and
Mm.
I'm a theology, I have my master's in theology. So I've done my whole, thesis is on the Abrahamic covenant and the study of all of that and understanding. But really back to the 2nd century, the councils began legislating that there should be no associating with the Jewish people except for the purposes of converting them. So we have this long, long, dark history of separating ourselves, the church, Christians, from the nation of Israel, from the Jewish people. And that root grew up to be a Holocaust. And
Yeah.
that's where it went. It went from pogrom to Holocaust. And it led to the annihilation of 1/3 of Jewish, of the Jews on the earth. It's remarkable. So I think one of the things to take note of, Luke, is going back to, and God anticipated modern Israel. He anticipated it. And with that anticipation, he showed to the world, I'm going to bring you back into the land to reveal my glory, that I am a covenant keeping, a promise keeping God. If I can't keep my covenant with the Jews and my promises to the Jews, how in the world do you think I'm going to keep it with you, who have been grafted in, a Gentile, a goyim, a Gentile group of people in the world? So we need to understand that eternal covenant, and that has got to be a guiding principle inside of the way that we view the Jewish people and really people everywhere.
Right.
You can't have hate-filled speech. We can't platform it and act like that's okay.
Yeah. I completely agree. And you have done a lot. I mean, you're an educator, so you've done a lot of this work, right? In terms of like resources, building out resources for people to better understand these important roots. And it really does, like, education is so critical. We're finding a lot of these Gen Z kids who are coming to faith. I'm Gen X, rock on. And I think Gen X was and millennials too, I think, were reacting in a lot of ways to the religious right, in terms of how, we saw the relationships with the previous generation was a reaction to the religious right. So we went, like, what we call third way, right? It's like, we're not the donkey or the elephant, we're the people of the lamb, et cetera, et cetera. I think we're now with Gen Z, they are post-Christian, right? Their starting point is post-Christian, and they got red pilled or in some cases black pilled, and they became conservative. And then someone comes along and says, well, the roots of that is in the Bible. And so they started reading the Bible. So we're getting a generation that's coming to faith, not like faith isn't where they're starting. Conservatism is where they're starting, and they're finding faith after. And so I think they don't have that biblical understanding coming in. They didn't grow up in churches. They didn't, like, everybody. So I go to church here. I'm in the Northeast, in the New York area, and every church I've gone to, the majority of the people in the pews are converts as adults. They were not raised in the church, in the majority. And so we're already up here. We're we're a generation already past where a lot of other people are. And so I think this education point is so critical, because they're, like, particularly these Gen Z kids, they're not starting with the Bible. They're coming with politics.
Yeah.
And we have to show them what we're talking about here, because it's not obvious to them.
Yes.
You do a lot of that kind of work, don't you?
I do. Actually, we are taking, members of Congress to Israel. I'm taking the senior leaders to Israel, and we have a notebook. We're taking them through. Where do we start? We begin with Abraham's covenant, that eternal covenant God made with Abraham, and how God caused the Jewish people to be the platform. They set up the entire society and infrastructure for Messiah who was to come. Who did that? God did it through the Jewish people. And so we see then that there's a sense of God looking now to our generation and a group of rulers and kings and nations and governments that are going to separate from Israel. They're going to hate Israel. And then there's going to be those that stand with Israel. And those that cooperate and stand with Israel, God is going to bless those nations. We cannot afford, Luke, to have the United States of America be in a position like the UK. Where year after year after year and decade after decade, we continue in this sort of diatribe, like France, against the Jewish people and against the nation of Israel. It's not going to work. So that is another reason why our conservative movement has Israel in it. It is a strong tent pole. It's a piece of what holds this nation in a place of blessing with God versus a place of cursing. And we see that in Genesis 12:3. God put Israel in the center of things and said, those that bless you are going to be blessed. Those who curse you are going to be cursed. It's sort of like he said to Adam and Eve, you can have every tree, you can have all the fruit and vegetables here. Eat off of all the trees. But I'm going to put this one in the center of the garden and I'm going to tell you not to eat from it. Wow. But in the same way, he said, I put Israel in the center of this garden of mine, this earth. And I'm telling you that if you bless her, I'm going to bless you. And if you curse her, I'm going to curse you. It's very, very clear. So we need to be very circumspect at this moment. And this generation, we do need a biblical world view. That means there's got to be education. We can't be illiterate when it comes to our Bibles. And I am proposing that these platforms like Turning Point USA, Tucker Carlson, that we have some sort of a, not a charter, but some sort of thing that we all agree on that is part of the conservative movement, that are our values, and we work off of that.
Right.
I know that many organizations have contributed to that in the past. I'm not so sure that we have that script of values that at least we're in agreement to the largest degree we can be.
Well, we used to. I mean, it used to be like there was the, the annual, as we were leading up to elections, there would be the, the platform and the platform committee stuff, and they would get together and we argue about these things, and out would come the platform. And this last one, it was like I get a lot of those things were probably long-winded and seemed boring and like nobody reads it anyways, etc. And so it was kind of jettisoned for single sentence kind of,
I know it. I saw that.
Bullet points, and which was fine. Like I get the impulse to a faster take, But listen, if you eat fast food every day, your arteries and your waistline and your brain all deteriorate. It's just like, and that's we are not, it is not sufficient to have all of the conservative policies in the world be, within the number of characters that X has. Right. Like, it required, like there is required to be, I mean, the fact that we're having this division and this issue, it is unfortunately, I think, a result of some of that attempts to try and make this a little bit easier, a little bit lighter, shorter, and we circumvent. I can't remember that circumvented the plan, and as a result, we got this division we have now. And so
and it seems that there may be a way to bring in some of our conservative pundits into that, not to the process, but we could bring them in and around it so that everybody understands this is what this conservative movement really stands for.
Right.
And if we're going to be leading out there and we're going to be looking to another generation, let's work together toward this. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have obtuse situations. We can handle that. What happened last week is reprehensible.
Right.
It is an aberration. It is not attached to this movement. It is not the Christian conservative viewpoint. And it is, it's dangerous because it does lead a new generation to think something that's not even true.
Yeah. No, it's incredibly dangerous. And I feel like, that's where my I'm like, my hobby horse this week is to call every conservative pundit I know saying, please, I need you to have a conversation this week about the movement
Yes. Yes.
overall, the
Yes.
health of the movement, because
Right.
we need to ditch the fast food we've been feeding ourselves. It's
Mhm.
not good for us.
No.
What this negativity, this America fails, this is like America, it's like they're claiming America first, but the way they talk, it's America like last. It's America not last as in, not prioritizing, but last as in we are losers, we're failing.
Mhm.
Moscow's groceries are stores are better than our stores. Venezuela's great and Iran's okay, and like it's always America is like the failure. And I
Mhm.
don't know how we're reading this pessimism as
Mm,
any other than like that fast food toxic
mhm.
injection into our movement's body. And I would love it if the leaders of this movement would say enough of that. Like, we want a vibrant, we want America first, we want the American dream, but it's going to come through people getting married, having families, focusing on their communities, focusing on building community within their, like, and this antagonism towards Israel, and at the same time, it's kind of passive affirmation of other nations like, I don't know, Qatar,
Right. Yeah.
China, Russia, like Venezuela. Like, why? What? How is?
Right.
It's a mystery to me
Mm.
how we're allowing this kind of rhetoric to take hold in our movement. And so,
Yes.
we can go around this you know this tree one more time, but I feel like we end up on the same spot. Like
We do.
we
We
got to be
need
better than this.
we need some of our conservative leaders and pundits that are going to be out there in the mainstream. We need them to be pointing back to the values
Yes,
of
yes,
our conservative movement. And some of those
yes,
are biblical and some of them are just um, common sense
yes,
business
yes.
practices. But we
Hmm.
need to be able to point back to that rather than having pundits trying to be as obtuse
Yeah,
and as much of an aberration as possible. It leads us off course. We
right.
don't want to lead the next generation off course.
Because
Um,
we saw what happened with the left when they went down this identity,
yes,
like they
they lost
they lost their way, and it was that
their way.
negativity, like America
Yeah,
is like inherently bad and is
yeah,
ruined, and like we have an original sin that we'll never be able to
yes,
redeem ourselves from, and we need our leaders to not to
mhm,
affirm, like, things are actually pretty good. Like they are, and we should talk about the revival that's taking place. We should talk
yes,
about how excited that young
yes,
men and women are want to get married, and they're
mhm,
rejecting pornography. They're rejecting the emptiness that they're like. There's this there's this young feisty songwriter. He's out there playing music out there, and he's got this line. Forrest Franks, I think, is his name. He's got his. We got dust on our Bibles, but brand new iPhones, and we wonder why we feel this way. I like it's so great because it's like we know that this is where Gen Z is. They're feeling that, and they're finding Jesus, and they're finding salvation, they're finding truth, and they're rejecting all these terrible things. And we got these Gen X leaders that are, oh, by the way, it's all still terrible. And I'm like, stop. Like,
right.
we guys, it's such a good message. There's so much optimism, so much that we
Yeah,
can lean into and point to and say, it's like this generation's so right for following in truth. And I want our leaders to talk about that. And I
I
think that will
you know
change the tone. And it's all rooted in biblical values, which comes out of Jerusalem anyways.
well, Luke, if we can really understand the fresh move of God in the United States of America is the revival that's happening on
Yes.
college campuses and
Yep.
really across the spectrum.
Yep.
And that
Yep.
is where the light is coming in. That's where the life-giving presence of God is. And we need to illuminate and we need to
Yes.
cooperate with God on what he's
Yep.
doing. And we need
Yep.
to illuminate the biblical values alongside that.
Yep.
And our failure to do so is to failure to steward what he's doing inside.
Yes.
It's happening inside this incredible conservative time frame where we've got a president that's adhering to a lot of our values. It's happening during this time frame. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm with you. Let's
Let's do it.
believe. Let's do it. I'm serious. Let's do it. And I believe that God is going to raise up some very powerful leaders that have a theological understanding and know how to present the biblical worldview inside the conservative movement for this next generation. You know, Nick Fuentes, God bless him. Really, God bless him, because he's representing something that is helping us to see that we're at an inflection point.
Yeah.
Not he himself, but what that represents, because we do not want to go in that direction.
Yeah.
It's dark.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's demonic. It leads you into a dark world. It's going to be dark to go that way. So, yeah.
No, I agree. So we got to wrap up. We've been chatting for a long time, which I love. How do people find you if they wanted to stay connected to the work that you're doing?
Well, you can, go on our website, U.S. Israel education.org. So USI education.org is our website. And then I'm on Instagram, Heather Johnston, and I'm on X as well.
Okay. All right. We'll have people find you.
Okay.
And we'll drop it in the links as well. So thank you, Heather, for joining me in this. And I really appreciate the work that you do and fellow warriors as we try and push back against the dark forces and illuminate these this revival is taking place. So everybody who's watching, thanks for following us. Like and subscribe to our channel here. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Luke.